Welcome, everybody, to this special event of the President's Business Challenge. Today, as you've heard, we have Pat Gilsinger. He's CEO of VMware, and a focus of his is balancing faith, family, and work. He actually has a book out about that, and he speaks in various places about that. VMware is the fifth largest infrastructure software company in the world. They employ about 9,000 employees. 2013, they had a revenue of $5.2 billion. It's interesting to kind of look at the development of Pat Gilsinger's career. I thought it was interesting that he started as a technician at age 18 at Intel. Think of that, coming out of a technical school, didn't have a bachelor's degree yet, but he was a hard worker, very bright, committed, and that was recognized. As a result, Intel paid for his education, become an engineer at Santa Clara University. From there, he went to Stanford University to get his master's degree in engineering and computer science. His journey has taken him about 30 years as one of the leading executives at Intel. And from there, he went to EMC near Boston and has 2012 became the CEO of VMware. He has a wife, Linda, and she's here with us today. Where are you, Linda? There you are. Welcome. Glad to have you. They have 4 children, so he has good expertise in balancing family. And it's Elizabeth, Josiah, Nathan, and Micah. It's a real privilege to welcome you here today, Pat. Why don't you come and enlighten all these young people?
Thank you very much, Cliff. It's been a great pleasure. I've gotten to know Cliff. Cliff honors us by sitting on the board of William Jessup University, and so I've gotten to know Cliff through that. And he said incredibly wonderful things about Valley, and today is my first opportunity to see that firsthand. So thank you very much, Cliff, and you've touched many, many lives and just in profound ways. So, thank you, Cliff, and it's a great privilege to be here today. So what I wanted to do quickly was give you a little bit of my story, a little bit, my journey to faith, my journey to leadership, and then there were sort of a handful of questions that were suggested I cover, so I'll sort of click through some of those things about being a CEO and being a Christian CEO and things like that. But most importantly, we're going to finish with questions. So, and if you don't ask questions, I will ask you questions, and I will try to embarrass you fully if you don't have questions to ask. You got it? Right, you're the first one, so be careful. So, okay. What's your name? Tej? Tej, okay, so I'll keep that in mind, Tej. So, right, so you're sitting front row middle. I mean, you're asking for it. So anyway, I was born and raised in Pennsylvania. I was a farm boy. I knew more about cow chips than computer chips growing up in Pennsylvania. I was baptized with full knowledge of what I was doing when I was 6 days old in a church back there. Yeah, that's a joke. You get it. Come on, wake up. There we go. So you get it, Tej? Right. So thought I was a Christian growing up. I went to church every Sunday, but I was rotten the other 6.5 days of the week. But I liked to go to church on Sundays because Dad would whoop me if I didn't show up, and it was good to impress the mothers and the grandmothers of the girls I was interested in. So there was a lot of good reason to go to church every Sunday. I thought I'd be a farmer growing up, a farmer in Pennsylvania. All of my dad's brothers and sisters, they were all farmers back there. My dad was number 8 of 9 children. So, Grandpa got to my dad at number 8 and said, "We have enough farms in the family, just work with your siblings." So my dad never had his own farm. And what's a farmer without a farm? So, as I started to get older, the cousins were growing up, and it was, what are you going to do for life? I accidentally took a scholarship exam when I was in tech school, so I ended up skipping my last year of high school. So, I would never dream of leaving the last year of a Valley Christian, but at the time, I skipped my last year of high school, got my associate's degree. So at 18 years old, I graduated from both high school and with my associate's degree, and Intel came recruiting for technicians, and there was sort of a nationwide shortage of technicians that year. And I was number 12 on the interview list by the guy. His name was Ron Smith, R.J. Smith, a longtime Intel executive. And if any of you have interviewed or about number 6, you sort of forget who was who. About number 9, you can't tell male from female. I was number 12 on his interview list that day. And he wrote this about me after he interviewed. He said, smart, aggressive, arrogant. He'll fit right in. So I got an invitation to come to Intel to interview at Intel. And, I'm 18 years old. I've never been on an airplane, never been to the West Coast. How long did it take me to decide to take a trip to Intel? About 2 nanoseconds, boom, of course, but I was never dreaming of moving to California. You all are crazy out here in California, earthquakes and everything else. But Intel interviewed me, offered a job, and so I moved to California at the ripe old age of 18 years old to start working as a technician at Intel. And worked for Intel for 30 years. So the first 10 years here in the Bay Area, 20 years up in Oregon. But part of the reason I took the job with Intel was Intel offered me the ability to finish my degree, and I had neither money or ability to otherwise get into university. So they paid for my bachelor's, master's, and PhD work. So I went to Santa Clara University for my bachelor's degree while working full-time at Intel. Went to Stanford for my master's degree, working full-time at Intel, and was working on my PhD. But I'll tell you that story in a second, and never got my PhD. So, as I was going, and as I moved to California at 18 years old, remember, I thought I was a Christian, right? Baptized at 6 days old, president of the youth group, thought I was a Christian. Actually, I went to church every Sunday, so I walked to a little church in Santa Clara Christian church, and met Linda the first Sunday I was there, right? And, she started to, she thought I was a smart aleck kid. I thought she, a silly high school kid, and I thought she was a smart aleck. And, anyway, so it was not love at first sight, but that's another story. But very soon after starting to go to Santa Clara Christian Church, it became really obvious that I was not a Christian. And the young adults group started to adopt me there. And the sermon topic in February of 1980, a few months after being in California, was Revelation 3:15 and 16. I know your deeds, that you are neither hot nor cold. I wish you were one of the other. But since you are neither cold nor hot, but lukewarm, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. And that sermon that day pierced me to the heart and says, that's me. Right? I like to go to church, impress the mothers and the grandmothers, meet girls, but I was certainly not hot for God. And that became, my decision at that point to become a full-time Christian and really become hot for God. Now, just a few, becoming a Christian, and, I was just loving this technology, loving Intel, doing great in my career. Started going to Santa Clara, and just loved engineering school there. The first time I had touched a computer, I was certain, that's what I wanted to do the rest of my life. When Linda and I first started to date, one time she asked me, do you know any other languages? I said, oh yeah, I know a dozen languages, and I'm working on English. And she gives me the funny look, and I said, oh yeah, C, Fortran, Lisp, Algol, today it would be Java and Python and so on, but you got to help me a bit, right, date. So, but I just love the technology and the aspects of technology at the time. And again, a few months, right, after becoming a Christian, I just felt this incredible burden from God. So here I am, just a baby Christian, 2-3 months, God saying, become a full-time minister. It's like, I don't want to be a full-time minister, right? I'm loving technology. What do I want to do to leave what I'm enjoying so much? And after months of wrestling with God, I finally laid a fleece before God, like Gideon in the Bible, laid a fleece before him. I said, okay, God, if this happens, I will become a full-time minister. And as soon as I did that, the answer from God was, you are a full-time minister. The workplace is your ministry. And at that point, I realized and became fully committed to being a full-time workplace minister. A few are called to vocational ministry. As Christians, we are all called to full-time ministry. Some in the workplace, some in the marketplace, some in the home place, some in the marketplace, some in the school place. but we're all called to full-time ministry. Just a few to vocational ministry. And my life verse became Colossians 3:23 and 24. Work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. And ever since then, it's been, yes, I love what I do in technology, but the question is, how can I use that platform that God has given me for his kingdom and for his purposes? So how many of you are full-time ministers? Okay, how many of you are Christians? Okay, let's try this. If you're a Christian, you're a full-time minister, right? And that is, what we're called to do. Now, I mentioned I had met this young lady, Linda. I was on the slow boat to matrimony, and I was going to finish my bachelor's, master's, PhD, and postdoc work before dreaming about getting married. And God had a slightly different idea. Linda and I had started dating, and she had endometriosis, a disorder of the reproductive system, and the doctor said, kids now or never. And I was on the slow boat to matrimony, and now basically the doctor says, kids now or never. So after wrestling with that, that was my sort of second major life crisis. We decided to get married, and she became pregnant very quickly thereafter. The first child was Elizabeth named after the mother of John the Baptist. From the barren womb came forward our first child, and then our second was Josiah. Josiah is now married, living in Gilroy, and brought forth our first grandchild. Kids are great, but skip kids, go straight to grandkids is now my philosophy. They're much better. So we have a grandchild in Gilroy. Third is Nathan. He's married up in Oregon. And we have our second granddaughter, Alice, up in Oregon. And then our youngest, Mike, up there. But the amazing part about this was full-time work, full-time school, and full-time family. And doing all of that together. And that was what we called the juggling years. And out of that became the book that Cliff mentioned, the Juggling Act that I wrote a number of years ago. And Linda has a chapter in the book about how do you make everything fit. Right, and as all of you are, beginning this next phase of your life, how do you make everything fit? Of working, going to school, and challenges, and just two brief things, from the book. There's a lot more in the book that you can look at, but just two things from the book about this, life of juggling. And I think this applies to anybody at any age, but two things for you to think about. The first one is, I had gotten, at 31 years old, I had written my first book. It was an exciting book. It's called Program in the 8386. Doesn't that excite you? Yeah, you get to the last chapter and you turn paging on. It's like, man, this is good stuff. Right? I had gotten my first patents. Right? I have half a dozen patents or so. I'd gotten promoted to vice president for Intel, the youngest vice president in the history of the company. So I'd accomplished a bunch of these goals that I had, and all of a sudden I hit this period of aimlessness. What do I want to do with the rest of my life? And after wrestling for a year with that, hit on the idea of a mission statement, writing a plan for life. And we make plans for everything that we're going to do, right? If you're going to, this quarter, right, or semester, you in semesters here? Right, semesters, quarter, semesters, right, this semester, you have a course outline. You know what your plan is for the year, right? Right? Someone like that. If you're going on vacation, you have an itinerary for vacation, right? But do you make a plan for life? And one of the most important things I challenge each of you to think about is your mission statement. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? And it's not like it's not going to change, but being thoughtful, being deliberate about that rest of the life. And when I was 31, I sat down, wrote my mission statement, worked on it for a long time, and that became sort of the guiding light for what I wanted to accomplish. And one of those things in the mission statement was become CEO. Right? And when I wrote that when I was 31, that was a pretty audacious statement. That I wrote down, and we'll talk just a bit more about that in our time together today. Another aspect that I talk about in the book a lot is mentors. And I had been working on the 8386 project at Intel, and this was, 8386, any of you hear of that? It's an ancient chip. Yeah, okay, we got some ancient people remembering an ancient chip. But how many of you have ever used an Intel-based computer? Okay, if you've ever used a Macintosh or a PC, you have worked on a chip. You have used a chip that I worked on. And here's, I have worked on every processor since the 86 I worked on in some capacity. And the last one I worked on, this is a Haswell chip, so I'll pass it around. I'd like it back afterward if I could. It's one of my favorite. So every chip from the 8086 up through and including the version and processor that Intel is introducing right now, I worked on in some capacity or another over that period of time. And I was taping out the 386. Here, Taj, you can start. Look at it. Catch it. There you go. Good job. That's the latest microprocessor from Intel that they're just bringing out with the next generation, like Apple Air Mac or Mac Air and so on is part of that one. But I was taping out the 386, charged and pulling together the whole design database for the chip. And I had to give a presentation to the executive staff of Intel. And this is Gordon Moore. Right, if you ever heard Moore's Law, this is the guy who invented Moore's Law. Andy Grove, one of the most famous people in the history of Silicon Valley. Robert Noyce, the Nobel Prize winner, inventor of the integrated semiconductor at the time. So they're all in the audience. And I'm giving a presentation on the tape out of the 8386. And I was mad at them because my computer systems were going down, right, and I wasn't able to get my chip out the door. So I was you got to fix this, and and I was very much in there. Here I am, 21 years old, I'm this precocious brat, right? In their face about fixing it. So a couple days later, I'm sitting in my office, and the phone rings, and it's just working. It's one of those where how many of you write programs? Yeah, you're just working on writing your program. You don't want to be interrupted. You're working on something, and finally I pick up the phone. Who is it? And the voice comes back, Andy. Andy who? And the voice, it's Andy Grove. This is the president, the founder, one of the most powerful people in Silicon Valley. I'm a 21-year-old brat at this point, talking to one of the, and he starts shelling me with questions. What do you read? What are you studying? What are your career objectives? What are you doing? And I was so beside myself because I was such an arrogant brat at the time. And he says, those are lousy answers. Be in my office in a week with better ones. And if the president of the company says be in his office in a week, what do? You either leave the country or you show up in his office. It's pretty simple. So I go, and that began a mentoring relationship with Andy Grove. And literally, I just saw him a few months ago, so even up to now, almost, over 30 years later, right, that kind of relationship. But people, and I call having relationships like Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy in your life, people who are making you better. Right? Challenging you, encouraging you, buddies along the way. And then finally, people that you're breathing into their life as well, and having those mentoring relationships. So just two ideas from the book that might be helpful even at this early phase, right? As you're thinking about your life and where you're going. Where do you want to go? A mission statement, and having some help along the way, mentors and mentoring relationships. Now, CEO. I'm CEO of VMware, and by the way, it's 18,000 employees, not 9,000. When I speak about being a full-time minister, I'm the senior pastor of the Church of VMware. Right? I'm also the CEO, but this is my flock. These are my people. These are the people that I'm responsible for their families and their livelihood as well. And VMware, tremendous company, 5th largest software company in the world, period. Not any of this infrastructure stuff. Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, Symantec, and VMware are the 5 largest software companies in the world. That's pretty cool, being the CEO of the 5th largest software company in the world, don't you think? Yeah, there's a lot worse jobs, right, than being CEO like that. And 30 years at Intel. When I left Intel, it was, I had interviewed with Joe Tucci, who's the chairman of EMC, and he had offered me a job to come to work for EMC. And as I came home after that trip and met with Linda, came home to Linda and said, I've been offered this job to go be president for EMC in Boston. And Linda's answer wasn't some nice, holy, let's pray about it and then talk about it. It was no. Right? Because we had 2 kids getting married that year. We had a daughter moving to China. We were empty nesting. It was just, no, we're not having any more life change this year. But as we talked more and more about it, I had gotten to this point in my career where it was really a question of, is the company helping me get to the next level, right? I've sort of finished what I wanted to do at Intel, and this opportunity to move to EMC. So we had been living in the Bay Area for 10 years. We moved to Oregon for 20 years. We moved to Boston then to take this job for EMC. My family on the East Coast was extremely happy about me moving back to the East Coast. And then when I got the question about taking on the job with VMware, they were, of course, quite upset. The black sheep is back out to the West Coast again, just terrible. And when we left the Bay Area 23 years ago, Linda said we were never coming back. Never say never to God, but we can talk more about that later. And with that, I became CEO for the first time of VMware. And VMware was founded 15 years ago. It was a startup out of Stanford University. The 5 people who started it were a team of people with this really core innovative idea. It's a Silicon Valley success story of great regard. That's a core innovation, right, that radically changed how computing was done. And the core idea is that in software, we can make one server, one computer, look like many computers. And having 10 computers become one computer with just a layer of software in it, enormous cost, right, of hardware savings, power savings, agility, ability to start and end computers. Some of you might use like VMware Fusion on your laptops. Any of you use that? Yeah, a few of you do. Right, so this ability to have virtual machines was just so powerful that the company went from sort of 0 to now, and this year we'll cross $6 billion in revenue this year. The things about becoming a CEO, why did I rise up to become a CEO? Right, I'll say, one thing was just working hard. I learned to work on a farm. You learn to work hard. When I first came to Intel, to me it was spectacular. I was having no cows that were trying to kick me, no horses that were trying to bite me, right? I didn't get dirty and filthy at the end of the day. To me, this was like heaven, right? In an air-conditioned building, it was just incredible. So working hard. Clearly blessed with a certain intellect associated, right, with what God had given me. But, I had one simple philosophy that I managed my career by. When I started at Intel, right, I was a technician. I only had one career objective at Intel, was to sit on the other side of the table. I was going to be the engineer telling the technician what to do, as opposed to being the technician being told what to do. So the simple career philosophy was sit on the other side of the table. So what skills, what do I need to know or do that I can sit on the other side of the table? And if you do that over and over again in your career, you're going to do just fine, right? And so what are you doing today to get ready for that job that you want tomorrow? And I'll say that's, very simply, right, a career philosophy. How can I be preparing myself? What skills, what classes, what do I need to learn to sit on that other side of the table? So I'd sit in meetings with the CEO, and I'd ask the question, armchair CEO, could have I said that? Do I have enough knowledge to know what it takes to sit on the other side of the table? Would have I done that? When I was president at EMC, I would meet regularly with the different board members. And meeting with board members, it's a fairly scary thing. Right? It's like going to the principal's office. It has a little bit of anticipation, but I would regularly meet with different board members, and I met with Jack Egan. And Jack Egan is the E in EMC. So his father was the original founder of the company. So, he has more shares, multi-billionaire, right, kind of thing. So meeting with him was always a little bit trepidatious. And I'd always ask him, what else do I need to do to be at that next level? And Jack responded to me. He said, 2 things you need to do, Pat. He says, one is, we're an East Coast company. You need to dress like an East Coaster. Right, so we're like, okay, right, Linda, we're going to Nordstrom's tonight. So that was easy. And he said the second thing was corporate finance. You don't know enough about executive level, corporate level financial topics to run a company like EMC. So I talked to Joe, the chairman of the company, and he helped me get a private tutor from Columbia University who became my corporate finance my personal tutor in corporate finance. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So, here, Linda and I took a cruise that summer, and we're cruising in the Nordics, and she's reading some, fiction novel, and I'm reading this 1,100-page corporate finance textbook. And we're both thoroughly enjoying ourselves, right? Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So, but, it was getting ready for that next assignment. So if you want to be CEO, right? Getting ready for the next assignment and getting the skills, the training, the capabilities, working hard along the way. A few other thoughts, a day in the life of a CEO. And, a CEO is everybody wants a piece of you when you're the CEO, right? There are people who pay people to consult them on how to meet with me, right? Because, hey, suppliers of other things, people who want to influence us, right? People are getting paid to figure out how to get into my office. Isn't that frightening, right, at that level? So everybody wants some of your time. So your time clearly is the most valuable resource that you possibly have, and you manage it like crazy. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal. I was interviewed a couple of months ago in the Wall Street Journal, and you can go look at it. You can Google it. It's called Boss Talk on Wall Street Journal, and in it, oh, wrong one. This one here. Anyway, piece of paper. You can't read it anyway. So, but in it. Right, it talks about that I color code everything on my calendar, right, and categorize everything. And I want my time to be used in the following way. I want 1/3 of my time being spent internally, manage the company, managing my team. 1/3 of my time is spent externally, right, to customers, to partners, and to industry. And about 1/3 of my time is spent on everything else. Right, and everything else is board meetings and press meetings and analyst meetings, right? Being able to, interact on social and other causes as well, all that kind of stuff. But, 1/3 is how I manage my time. And I'm very disciplined about keeping track of the time, because your time is your most important resource of anything that you do. Okay, good? Okay, so another sort of topic that was mentioned to touch on a little bit is, how do I, as a CEO, carry out my marketplace ministry as a CEO? This is a publicly traded company. And, the first thing is that, if you're a CEO, if you're successful, if the company is being successful, the board can almost do nothing to fire you. And if you're not being successful as a CEO and the company is not being successful, the board can almost do nothing but fire you, right? So every other position in the company is graded on the curve. The CEO is graded pass-fail, right? And again, if the CEO is doing well, the board can almost do nothing to get rid of him, right? And if he's not doing well, the board can do nothing but get rid of him, right, as well. It's the one thing that they make. So you're always sort of in this fishbowl kind of environment. It's, as they say, it's a lonely place to be the CEO. Now, that also gives great freedom as well. So job one for me is what? Make the company successful, right? And no aspect of my ministry can possibly get in the road of that, because that's my fiduciary responsibility to the company, to the shareholders, et cetera, is to make the company successful. And obviously making the people and the family and right, all of those aspects of the company critical, but making it successful is by far the most important thing to do. But in that journey of being the CEO, I also have then tremendous freedom, tremendous liberty on how I carry out and present my faith in that setting. And one of the things, the most powerful witnessing tool that you will ever have in the workplace. You ready for this? Just one thing, if you want to be able to share your faith in the workplace at any level of the workplace, if somebody has a personal issue or a personal challenge in their life, do this one thing, and you will have great ministry opportunities in the workplace. You ready for this? May I pray for you? Right? And you just do that. Somebody says, I have a sick relative. What's their name? May I pray for you? Right, in it. And I have said that probably 10,000 times to people I know who are Buddhist, who are atheists, who are agnostic, right, who are hostile to the faith. And I have never, ever had one person say, you may not pray for me. Can you believe that? People who don't even believe in God, right? May I pray for you, right? And that is the safest, most powerful possible thing that you can do in the workplace. May I pray for you? And then a week later, you come back and say, oh, how is your aunt doing? Right? And you demonstrate true care in the workplace. Early in my career, I was manic about getting things done and being successful. And to me, it wasn't like I was this person who wanted to hurt other people to get the job done, but I just didn't care about other people because I was focused on getting the job done. And as I progressed in my relationship, in my career, it's become more and more clear to me that relationships are far more enduring than results. And if you're going to prioritize results over and over, and this is a learned behavior, I am focused, I'm type A, I'm driven to get the job done. But as you progress in your career and in your life, relationships are far more enduring than results ever will be. And as I have meetings with people and one-on-ones, how is your wife doing? How are the kids? How are the family? Right? Is there things I can pray for? And that becomes, at any level of your career, the most powerful way that you can possibly carry out and exhibit your faith. Last thing I wanted to talk about quickly, and then we'll have questions, is as a CEO of a publicly traded company, how do I build Christian values into that company? Because obviously, I can't, put Bible verses in our corporate mission statements and things like that. So how do you do that? And, one of the things that is most powerful for successful companies is the corporate values. And, when I came to VMware a little bit over 2 years ago, I asked, what are the corporate values? And they weren't even written down anywhere. There was no statement of the values. They sort of had them sort of vaguely described and so on, but there was no core, these are the corporate values. So what we did is we started a project to define the values of VMware. And we came up with the acrostic EPIC. We are an epic company with epic values, with epic products, with epic customers. We are epic as a thing. And EPIC stands for E is execution, P is passion, I is integrity, C is customers, and C square, EPIC square, is a community. And those are our values. And if you ask any of the 18,000 people that work for us, what are the values of VMware? It's epic, right? It is what we are as a company. And we over and over again talk about our values. And as it's, some will say the phrase is values and culture eat strategy for lunch. Far more powerful and enduring than any aspect of the product or strategies that you would have. And so we've gone to great lengths to build the values into the company. Now, when I speak about our values and I get to the I, integrity, it sounds like a sermon. I don't quite quote the scripture references to go with it, but I'll tell you, it's as close as you can get to a Sunday morning sermon in a corporate setting when I talk about integrity. And when I talk about community in that setting, boy, right, it sounds an awful lot like Matthew 5, right? And by their good deeds, they will glorify your Father in heaven, right? By the good things that we're going to do. So there's tremendous ways for you to present yourself in those settings, right? And clearly the values that come right from it. So that's probably, I think, one of the most powerful ways that I get to make VMware into what I will call a Christian company, even though it clearly is a secular company as well. So anyway, here you can look at our values. So with that, I'd like to have some time for questions, if that's okay, and we'll take questions on anything at all. Yes, Todd, hey, you got it. Here, this is good, right here in the front.
What's the biggest mistake that you've made over the course of your career so that we can learn from that?
Biggest mistake. Thank you very much for that nice, embarrassing first question. So I'll give you, let me say there was a situation, and I'll explain the situation a little bit, where I had become very well known for my my faith in the workplace perspective. The book that I referenced here, The Juggling Act, we were about, I was getting it published in China. And I was very excited because, Chinese love technology, very family-oriented and really, right, have great rapport for American business leaders. So I was very excited to get the book published in China. And today it's about 50,000 copies have been sold in China alone. So, very successful book. And, that was happening. And I didn't know this, but I had asked some of the Intel China people to, review the book and help me, I wanted to make sure the translation was good and all of those kind of things because, Chinese and Christian materials, all the sensitivities there. And it turns out they helped me more than I realized. And in fact, they already pre-ordered books by Intel to go give to the Intel customers in China. And they started to use Intel resources to help get my book launched in China. Clearly crossed the line, right, into, right, areas that, truly were, for my beliefs, right, and my faith, right, cross that personal, professional line. People complained, right? Complaints came to the HR department. They made it to the CEO's office. I got summoned to meet with the head of HR and the CEO. And, you go into one of those meetings, you know it's bad, right? Just, it's going to be bad. And I go into this meeting, and I was asked to give a muzzle, right? That I would stop speaking on faith in the workplace, that I would stop, preaching on weekends, and, all of that kind of stuff, right? And I had made mistakes in this process. I mean, people had done things, and clearly, and I was just so conflicted for it, and I accepted the muzzle order. I said, okay, I will do that. And the second I did it, I know I made a mistake, because I just was in a spiritual fog from that point forward. Right? And I have no idea how God would have handled the situation. I mean, this was sort of like a corporate lion's den kind of experience. I have no idea how God would have, worked through that or the miracle through that, but I do know as soon as I said yes to that, right, it was a mistake. Because I was no longer being a witness in the workplace. I was no longer being a marketplace minister, what I committed to God many years before. I lived in a spiritual fog for 18 months. And after 18 months, I went to the CEO. I asked to lift the muzzle. I said I did everything I said I would. And when the muzzle was lifted, it's like the spiritual sunshine came out the very next day. Right? And in fact, just a couple of days later, I led a guy to the Lord, and they've become great friends of our family. I've baptized 3 of their 5 kids, and just the tremendous things happened immediately thereafter. But for 18 months, lived in that spiritual fog, and clearly, I could have done things better going into it. But ultimately, even in those settings in the workplace, you have to stay true to your beliefs, to your faith, and be ready for God to do a miracle in your life, or to carry the consequences of persecution, right, if that's what he wants to bring about in your life at the time. But I know that was a huge mistake for me at the time. Okay, other questions? What else? Yeah, over here.
What got you to start liking engineering and technician stuff?
What caused me to start liking engineering?
Yeah.
So, I was, so I was sort of this farm boy. I ended up going to a tech, I had VOTech, vocational tech, right? Started to play with TVs and radios and just really sort of had a knack for that, right? When I was like in 10th grade in high school. And then when I got this scholarship to go, and the first time I touched a computer, that was it. Right? And I immediately knew that's what I wanted to do, right, with my life and my career. I just loved the technology. So it was about a 10th grade when I first started to play with that, really liked it, was highly encouraged, found myself being successful with it. And one of the things I'd say for each of you in that respect is find something that you love. The days pass like minutes. If you're working in a capacity or in an area that you're passionate about, you love, you're good at, you're fulfilled, that God has gifted you in, and if you're in something that you're not passionate about, go find something you are, right? And to me, that's just the career advice I give to people over and over again. And and if you're good at something, you're passionate about it, right? You're invested in it, you will have a great career. Doesn't mean you're going to make a whole lot of money, but you're going to love what you do every day that you show up, and you're going to be good at it, and you're going to be able to, affect those and bring it to that environment. And if you, just are the best possible person in whatever situation you find yourself in your career, because remember, you're working for the Lord Jesus Christ, right? He wants your best. He wants your excellence in those things. And that's what I found as I got into technology. That is what I wanted to do and what I was, uniquely, I think, skilled at and good at. Others?
What would you say is the most difficult part of being CEO of such a big company?
The most difficult part of being a CEO of a big company, I'll say one of the hardest things about being a CEO, and I think this is an endemic challenge of any significant leadership role, is you are lonely. Right? You have very few, for instance, things hit my desk. And, am I going to call the chairman of the board on this issue? No, I'm not going to call him, right? Am I going to talk to the board members about it? No, I'm not going to talk to, it's not, something that, deserves their attention. So who else do you talk to about it? Well, lots of things. I can't talk to people that work for me, right? Because they're bringing these things to my chair, right? A lot of the things I deal with are highly confidential. I mean, are we going to acquire this company or not? How are we going to handle this situation? Maybe it's a lawsuit or something like that. It's a very lonely role in many capacities, and you don't have that many people that you can really talk to and interact with. I remember when I was the president of EMC, right? And I found myself doing this, that I would go to Joe, the CEO and chairman of the company, and at the end of the day, I'd go walking by his office, I'd walk in and I'd say, hey, Joe, I just want you to know, right? And we have this problem with this product and blah, blah, it's gonna slip, we got some bugs, a customer's upset with this, we got hit with a lawsuit today or something like that. But Joe, don't worry about it, I don't need to do anything, I just want you to know. Right? So what I was doing was I was ruining his night, right, by putting my anxieties on his chair. So now what happens to me now as CEO? Right, at the end of the day, right, my chief attorney comes walking by and she says to me, oh, we got hit with a lawsuit today, but don't worry about it, Pat, I got it under control. My chief product guy will come by and says, oh, we hit a big bug today, we're gonna have to slip that release, but don't worry about it, I got it under control, Pat. The sales guy will come by, oh, we lost that order, Pat, but don't worry about it, I got it under control. What are they doing to me? Exactly what I used to do to my boss, right? Say, here's my anxieties, right? I just want you to know, right, to put them on your chair. Now, what do I do with all these anxieties? I can't do anything with them. I'm not going to call the chairman or the board or something like that. It's a lonely role in that regard. And I say it really is, in that sense, it's a very challenging leadership role. And I say, as I've gotten, like big megachurch pastors, others in very significant leadership roles, it's a very, similar characteristic because there aren't many people that you can sit with and just really have open conversations with and dialogues. And I have a couple of mentors I meet with regularly, people, who I have a very confidential relationship to share that with, but it's challenging in that respect. Because it's not like you can just sit down and talk to 5 people and say, let's kick this around and get some ideas, right, to take care of it. It's a very lonely leadership capacity that you're in so many situations. What else? Yeah, over here.
What is it about your job that gets you up every morning? What is it that you look forward to when you're doing?
Yeah, what is it gets me up, get me excited about my job? And a couple of things. One is and I've always, to me, this is always the wonderful thing about technology, is that the industry is changing so rapidly. Right? And we could be in, think about other industries that move slowly, like the construction industry. It's not like construction changes all that much sort of year to year. The materials are the same, cost of labor, all of those kind of things. Cars, right? Hey, not like, big, huge changes. Technology, wow, in 2 or 3 years, things change entirely. Entire industry structures can change. How many of you have heard of Google? Right? 15 years ago, they didn't even exist. Right? You think about how rapidly, they have become, right? This mammoth position in the industry. And to me, that's was something so thrilling about the technology industry. It's just how quickly and how dynamic things are, and no place more so in the world than here in Silicon Valley. Right? Of the most dynamic industry in the world, this is the most dynamic place in the most dynamic industry in the world. And to me, it's sort of like this three-dimensional chess game every day. How can I help the company move forward? What are the right technology choices? How do we compete and position that into the industry? It's extremely powerful that way. Many years ago, when I was fairly early in my career at Intel, I said, what was my long-term career objective? And I said, I wanted to be involved in a piece of technology that touched every human being on the planet in every modality of life, work, learn, sleep, and play, right? And I said, that was my objective, right? I wanted to work on a piece of technology that touched every human on the planet, right, in every aspect of their life. Now, is that a big goal? Yeah, that's, it's like 7.5 trillion people, right? This is a big, billion people. Sorry, not trillion, sorry. Not quite that much population yet, so, but big goal, every modality of life. Today, about 2.5 billion people have a persistent connection to the internet. And then my Christian objective is work on a piece of technology, touches every human on the planet and every modality of life so that the cause of Christ may be advanced. And if you think about technology, technology is neutral. It can be used for good or for bad. When Gutenberg invented the printing press, what was his objective? Print the Bible, right? Was he planning on it being used to print Playboy? It was neutral, right? It could be used for good or bad, right? Same for the internet. It can be used for good or bad, right? It can be used for, right, communicating, right, and connecting people all across the world, right, for medicine, for healthcare, for God's word, or it can be used for thievery and so on. And so today, we have this incredible position, right, the technologies that we are building, and no place more so on earth than here, right, are connecting more of humanity. One more little question for you. Why do you think Christ came in the period of history where he did? Why did God choose to send his son, Christ, to the earth, right, in that period of history and time? The period of the Pax Romana, right, the period of peace under Roman Empire. What was the greatest technological achievement of the day in that period of Roman history? Roman roads. They made the earth more connected in that period of history than any time before or after that period of time. Right? And if you study demography, right, over half of the Earth's population was connected at that period of time. Right now, we have about 2.5 billion persistent connections against the population over a little bit, over 7 billion people. Within the next decade or so, we will have more than half of humanity connected to the internet. So we will get the Earth more connected in the next 20 years. You will get the earth more connected in the next 20 years than it has been since the time of Christ. And maybe, in fact, I think about this as technological eschatology, if you could. That maybe, in fact, that will be part of what ushers in the second coming of our Lord and Savior, right? And that maybe the technologies that I'm working on and participating with, right, will be, part of that. And, in that, to me, there's just take great pleasure that, the things I'm working on are changing the earth, making people's lives better, and maybe, in fact, it will, hasten the day of our Lord's coming. Other questions?
Hi, what were some of the weaknesses that you realized you had and then tried to strengthen over the course of your career?
Some of the weaknesses I had. So, when I gave the joking comment at the beginning, right? I said, smart, aggressive, arrogant, right? He'll fit right in. And I don't think of myself as particularly arrogant even at that point in my career, but I was perceived as arrogant. I was perceived as so focused on my own objectives that I came across as egotistical, right, and self-centered. in that process. And what happened over time, and the comment I gave you about relationships, versus results, right? It's like, yeah, I could get things accomplished just because I was so aggressive and so motivated to accomplish things, but I didn't necessarily bring other people with me, right? And a true leader, right, it's not just, that, it was said to me that, a leader makes the light bigger for all the people to stand on the stage, right, when they take a bow. And, that was something in my career that I had to learn, a lot of different personal behaviors in that regard about how to really, really make it about the team. And as a demonstration of that, I was very honored last year that there was an article that came out from the Washington Post, and it named me the least narcissistic CEO in America. So I don't know, maybe that's an egotistical thing by saying I'm the least narcissistic CEO, I'm not sure, right, as well. But, to me, and when it came out, right, to me, that was like, okay, I've really changed my character, right, in this area and how I'm perceived and so on. And by the way, they have a very scientific method for how they define the least narcissistic CEO. So, right, you can go read the articles in the Washington Post about a year ago with it. So that was one, right, really this relationship aspect, ego, arrogance, et cetera. We all have our areas of sin as well in our lives, and how do you battle those on a daily basis? And CEOs are known, right, for they become this position of leadership, and how do you remain humble? Right, what are the three most important things about a Christian? Humility, humility, humility. And how, as a CEO, when now everybody is here to please me, right? I got thousands of people who want to go please me on a daily basis. And how do I say my job daily is to be the servant? I model, my goal as a CEO is what I call the blue-collar CEO. I get my hands dirty. I want to stay in the trenches. I want to be close to my people as well, as opposed to become the pompous CEO, right? Because as you get to those higher levels of leadership, all these people want to please you. You get, all these different perks and honors and other things that come with it. And how do you daily say, no, my job is to stay really, really close to the ground? Right, and one of the other aspects of that, right, for me as a tech company CEO, is always staying close to the tech. Right, staying close to the technology as well, right? So that, it's like, Scully or Cook versus Jobs. Jobs was technical. Gates versus Ballmer. Gates, technical, right? And their leadership was very much of a tech company staying close. And I think, for me, that's helped me to stay much more, right, grounded and close to it. Maybe the last thing in that respect is a wife who's ready to challenge me. Right, and Linda's been my balance many, many years, and if she thinks I get a little bit out of line, she's not too hesitant, right? She's a quiet sort of soul, right, but a very strong personality, right? And having those kind of people, whether it's mentors, spouses, others around you, that challenge you and make you better. And some of my mentors as well have been very hard on me that way, right, to keep pressing me to, stay, not just humble, right, but really to challenge me in those areas that, I might, get out of line, out of control, right, make statements that really are, inappropriate in different settings as well. Okay.
What is the best way for one to seek out a mentor?
What's the best way to seek out a mentor?
Yeah.
So imagine, Taj, right? Tej. So I go up to Tej, and I say to Tej, there are things that you can, that I can learn from you, right? I've been impressed by your life in these areas, right? Could I just buy you a cup of coffee and just talk to you about some of the areas that I would love to have you speak into my life? Now, at this point, Tej, he hasn't been this complimented in years. So he's impressed, right? He's pretty excited about this. Wow, right, and so on like that. And demonstrating, right, that you clearly are going to make a good use of their time, right? And I want to listen to you. I want to learn from you. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to show up with an agenda, right? I got things I want to learn in that as well. And look for people who you think can really breathe into your life. And I'll tell you, people, if they think that their time is being utilized well, that it's going to make a difference somewhere in life, they're ready to invest and partner in it. And I had a guy in my office this morning, Andy, he's a local minister here in the Valley. And I'll tell you what, he shows up with an agenda, right? Here's what we talked about last time. Here's what I've done about what we've talked about last time. Here's the things I want to discuss today. It's sort of like, this is a good use of my time, right? As I'm speaking into their life. And, look around for people that can be that. Some of your mentors are probably in this room, of people that, should be those in your life as well. And, make it a good use of time and know that, they really want to, people generally get great pleasure out of helping other people grow and mature to that next level in their life.